what I want to talk about here is what happens to that pyruvate after we have formed it in our glycolysis. So if you haven't watched the previous video yet on glycolysis, make sure you watch that first. So what we ended with was talking about the end products of glycolysis being a couple of ATP, a couple of NADHs, but then also these two pyruvate molecules. Okay, so what were these pyruvate molecules? They were 3 carbon molecules. Remember, we formed 2 of them. So carbon was glucose was a 6 carbon molecule. These pyruvates are each 3 carbon. So we formed 2 of them. Okay. Now, if we didn't have oxygen, as we mentioned, then that's anaerobic. This pyruvate is going to build up. It gets converted into lactic acid. The lactic acid diffuses into the plasma, goes to the liver, and then it can ultimately get reconverted back into pyruvate, back into glucose through something called the Cori cycle. But here we're assuming that we have oxygen. Okay, so here we're assuming that we are aerobic in nature, right? So notice the aerobic term here, right? So in this case, we have oxygen. So that pyruvate, instead of getting converted into lactic acid, that pyruvate, the 3 carbon molecule, is going to move into the mitochondrial matrix. Okay, so when looking at this mitochondria here, this pink membrane here, this is called the outer membrane. This folded yellow membrane is called the inner membrane. And then within that yellow membrane, all of that space, that's called the mitochondrial matrix. Okay, so what happens here is this 3 carbon pyruvate, and remember we have 2 of them, so this is happening twice. So notice the times 2 on our image here, so times 2 times 2. It is going to be acted upon by an enzyme called pyruvate dehydrogenase. Okay, pyruvate dehydrogenase. And what's happening here is this enzyme is adding first it's removing a carbon. So we're going from a 3 carbon molecule to a 2 carbon molecule. A 2 carbon molecule, in this case, this is called acetyl. Okay, this acetyl, acetyl, and then adding something called coenzyme A. Okay, so this acetyl-CoA is something that we form as a result of this process called pyruvate oxidation. Okay, as a result, because we removed a carbon, remember we removed 1 carbon from each pyruvate, so we removed 2 carbons, you form 2 molecules of CO2. This is carbon dioxide. Right, and then we transfer electrons from NAD to something called NADH. Remember, NADH. Think of that again as like pre-ATP. Okay, it's going to be used in a stage coming up to ultimately make lots and lots of ATP, but it's not ATP yet. Okay, so in this pyruvate oxidation, we're not making any ATP directly. All we're doing is we're converting this pyruvate, which is 3 carbons, into a molecule called acetyl-CoA. Okay, this acetyl-CoA is going to be important because it is going to move into our next phase. That's going to be called the citric acid cycle. Sometimes it's called the Krebs cycle as well. Right. So this is a way to also visualize this process of pyruvate oxidation. So this is in the mitochondrial matrix. So again, this inner compartment within this inner membrane, we're taking our 3 carbon pyruvate. Again, count the carbons. We have 1, 2, and 3, and then it's acted upon by this pyruvate dehydrogenase, and now we have 1, 2, and the 3rd carbon is right here in the form of carbon dioxide. Okay, so we're going to use that acetyl-CoA. So here's this coenzyme A molecule added to the acetyl molecule, and this acetyl-CoA is going to enter into something called the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle, right? And this is where we are essentially converting this acetyl-CoA. We're removing carbons, and in the process we're making a little bit of ATP, we're making something called FADH2, and then we're making some more of that NADH here. Okay, so that's what we'll focus on in the next part. So this is a relatively short part. This part here, this pyruvate oxidation, this is sometimes called a preparatory step, or it's an intermediate step in between anaerobic glycolysis and aerobic citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. Okay, so it's getting our molecules ready to enter into this next phase, the citric acid cycle, which is then going to lead into something called the electron transport chain.